Okay, so I thought I would take this time to just walk you through the design for the interior. This is my really janky approach, so excuse me. So what I did here is I downloaded an interior model of the Ascent and then just confirmed. I just went out and measured all the dimensions myself and scaled the model to the exact dimensions of what my vehicle is. So this was my original plan for the subfloor, which was all 80/20 aluminum extrusion, and I've really simplified this a ton. So I've actually ended up removing pretty much the whole structure and just running 3 different pieces of extrusion on the floor. I'll show you right now. So I have one of these brackets already pre-mounted up. So I just need to drill some holes right here to mount this to the pre-existing seat floor bolt holes. You can see kind of right here that the floor kind of swoops downward towards where the floor is right behind the driver and passenger seats. And that's actually where the location of the front bolt is that holds the seat rail in. So essentially that bracket right here, this plate, I'm going to have to bend to the angle of that slope and bolt it in right there. Pretty sure it's going to work. So I thought I ordered 4 of these aluminum extrusions to go along the channels that sit in this floor, but I only ordered 3 and they were all custom cut to length. I don't want to wait for a 4th, so I'm just going to build it with 3, and that's going to be totally fine. And then, of course, I measured out the space for the Dometic CFX 325 liter, which I have right here. Boom. It's actually pretty sizable, and it fits perfectly, and I mean perfectly, behind the passenger seat right here. So the actual distance between where the second row floor swoops downward to the actual seat connection of the passenger seat is exactly the dimension of the fridge. And then my dream was just to, let me pull this back down. So essentially taking a nice old piece of 3/4 inch birch, pre-finished birch here, and then cutting that section out, which we've already done. And then something that's not in the model that I just did kind of freestyle was I cut a hole on the left side here that can fit the water jug. And then the floor just runs the full distance of this new open area. So it runs all the way from the driver passenger seat to just underneath the connections of the 3rd row. And I have to do it that way because I need space for 3 car seats. So we've got 3 car seats mounted across the 3rd row bench. And that's that. And now to the back. I'm still in the process of designing this, but when I had originally laid this out, I wanted the Yeti 1500X battery because it can power the fridge for roughly 20 to 30 hours, depending on a lot of different variable factors. But that's the general sense. So I went for the 1500X as opposed to the 1000X. And I was going back and forth on whether or not I should run this off of the car's 12 volt, because there is a 12 volt outlet in the back of the trunk area, but it's just not going to charge it as quickly. It can take, 13 to 15 hours to fully charge the battery again while it's being drained by the fridge. So I wanted something that was a little bit more robust. So the guys at JBM installed the Goal Zero Yeti Link vehicle integration kit, which essentially attaches to your battery or your alternator, and then a fuse. And then there's an extension cable that can run the length of the car. I think it's 12 feet. And that just runs all the way back to the Yeti 1500 so that every time your vehicle is running and is able to support the draw of the battery, you're charging your Yeti, which is awesome. And then it also, with the vehicle integration link in vehicle mode, it does not draw any power when the vehicle's off, which is very important. So if you are installing it yourself, make sure you switch the Yeti link into vehicle mode, not tank mode. There's plenty of videos out there that explain how to do this. So the problem is, the guys at JBM called me and they unfortunately can't run the cable to the right side. I really wanted it to be on the right side because, as you know, the rear row is separated into 2 seats and 1 seat on the passenger side. And I wanted that 1 seat on the passenger side so that we could fold down the 2 seats and have a little bit more space that can kind of extend through the interior. And that's not looking like it's going to happen. So I got pictures from them, and they were able to run the cable actually on the outside of the vehicle and heat shielded it, wrapped it, made different mounting brackets for it underneath, and it's going to come out the driver's side in the rear cargo area. So right now what I'm working on is a full redesign of the rear cargo area. And so I'm going to remove the component tray that comes with the Ascent, which holds your jack, a couple tools, and it's just sort of a plastic tray that lives inside the cargo area underneath that lid. So I'm pulling all that out, reclaiming a lot of square footage there, or I should say square inchage. And I'm going to build this. So essentially what this is a little box for the battery to live in. And these holes are just rough. I don't know if I'll make them this big or make them smaller, but I want to create space for ventilation back there without it just being in this enclosed wooden box. So this will all be birch surfaced in an automotive fabric, so it looks nice and tidy. And then I'm going to build some kind of hinge so I can just whip this open, pull the battery right out, and it'll also just come down and latch somehow in the front, just so we're able to load stuff on there, but it's also not impossible to pull the battery out. Let's say we're going into a hotel and want to charge the battery, easy to pull it right out and get it charging that way. And then I'm going to build some kind of protective cover right here. And then what I've got happening on the right side that I haven't yet designed is I have these nice tray sliders that can support 500 pounds. And since what you don't see is that this whole panel is inset in the trunk space about 7.5 inches. So it's about 7.5 inches up to where the tailgate connects. So there's a bit of a depth there. So what I want to do is build a little bit of a platform inside and have a tray that can pull out for things like diaper changes. Just makes things a lot easier. And it's nice to be able to do that stuff outside of the car, not just in the car. And then last but not least, I just wanted to roughly mock up and this is outdated, but this is essentially the dimensions of the Go Fast rooftop tent. And in this configuration, I was just exploring if I could get some solar panels on there. And I think we're going to head the route of not doing solar because we'll be driving so much and potentially stopping in hotels in between campsites that we don't really need a solar solution because all we're really powering is the fridge and potentially and phones. And we feel like we're going to have plenty of power to be able to do that, which will be great. So this is the GFC RTT. And then I've got the beef rack bars mounted on there. And I just wanted to visualize what it would be like to put our massive Thule rack on top of the Go Fast RTT. And roof load has been a major conversation in my brain late at night, keeping me up as to can the Ascent hold more than 176 pounds of dynamic capacity, dynamic load? Is that capacity increased with the Prinsu rack, with something with more substantial crossbars? Nobody can make a professional recommendation. I'm not going to make a professional recommendation or a personal recommendation. I'm just going to tell you what I'm going to be comfortable with trying out. And if it breaks, it breaks, right? Like, we can't go through life just being too cautious. We need to just send it. So I reached out to Prinsu and said, hey, does this style of rack increase the capacity of a roof? And they said, there's a ton of factors involved, but essentially, yes. Because when you have just the roof rails, you're putting a lot more weight just over the pillars. So you're not really changing much of the static capability, but you're really not displacing any of the dynamic weight. And the thing about a one-piece rack with plenty of crossbars is that any kind of dynamic weight can actually be shared across the pillars differently than the OEM roof rails can. Again, this is not a professional recommendation. I would never recommend or tell you to exceed the listed manufacturer limitations on roof capacity. That's stuff you probably don't want to mess with, but I'm going to mess with it. So I think I can get the Prinsu rack, the Go Fast camper, rooftop tent, and the Thule loaded up with like maybe 50 pounds of gear and be fine. And I'll report back. So yeah, that's essentially, so doing everything in SketchUp has been really great because it just lets me have a space where I'm not having to use pen and paper, and I can just draw things out, visualize it, and then get real measurements. So when I come back and actually need to cut these sections of birch, I know exactly how long they need to be, and helps a lot. So yeah, that's the general tour of what the interior will be.